So let's remember to have fun. Remember, if you're getting close to the red line, take that 2 extra step or 1 extra step so you don't ice it. Same with offsides. Remember to stay behind. And if you hear offsides, just come right out the blue line, go right back in. And that's it. Let's have fun. Let's bring it in.
1, 2, 3, Fury!
The Frontenac Fury Adams is one of the approximately 50 girls' teams playing organized hockey in the Kingston area. Currently, there are about 800 girls and women who play organized hockey in Kingston. 50 years ago, in 1969, 19 girls and women came together to form, other than a few school teams, the first women's hockey team in Kingston. We called ourselves the Kingston Red Barons.
Well, I was so lucky to grow up on the river because this was our playground in the winter. And in those days, the bays would freeze by Christmas. This part, the river is 2 miles wide here, so it really usually wasn't frozen till New Year's. But then we could do anything on it, and it would stay frozen till probably the end of March. If you were really lucky, the whole river would be just one huge sheet of black ice. And you could skate forever, and it's like flying when you've got that kind of ice.
My family was always very involved with hockey as I was growing up. My uncle had originally played hockey for the Detroit Red Wings over in the NHL. And then I would always watch Hockey Night in Canada with my grandfather most Saturday nights, which was really enjoyable because he enjoyed watching the games and loved having me come and sit with him. And that was a lot of fun. I remember that being a Saturday night event.
So for the road hockey part, I must have started out when I was about 5 or 6. Right in front of the house, we cleared off a big section of the road because it was a dead-end road. And to the chagrin of the drivers on McDonald Street, we cleared the snow and the sand as well. So that that didn't sit well with the neighborhood.
It's my older brother and myself when we're playing shinny on the creek in Battersea. And us kids would spend most of our winter time playing shinny. My 2 brothers and I were close in age, so the 3 of us, and anybody we could find around Battersea as well that wanted to play would come and play with us.
So you had an early love of hockey?
Oh, early love of hockey, yes. Always loved hockey.
I was enticed to start playing hockey by being a rink rat at the Napanee Arena. My dad was arena manager for years, and so I used to rush home every Friday so I could spend the weekends at the rink with him. And in that time frame, all the kids that helped in some shape or another around the arena were called rink rats. And the rink rats, when they had their chores done, could access any unused ice. So I became a part of that as young as I could and really enjoyed playing hockey with the boys.
We would start early in the season when the ice was just black. Before it had snowed, as you know, when it snows, the ice gets white. But when it hadn't snowed yet, the ice was black, and we would play into the night. And of course, on the black ice, there was no point in having a puck, so we'd used to use a tin can because we could keep track of it then. And it was just what we did. Didn't have TV.
The Church Athletic League didn't have any girls organized hockey at all and didn't allow girls to play in the boys hockey at that time. So I really never had an opportunity to play. I did help coach in the boys Church Athletic League with another girl that I played hockey with later on when I was in high school. But girls didn't join hockey in my time. That just wasn't acceptable and didn't happen.
So then on the odd day I'd go over to Mowat Avenue, at the top of Mowat Avenue, and look down on the Church Athletic League. That was before they had a roof on that building, and it was great. It was all lit up and a great big shiny ice surface, but that was reserved for the boys at that time, and I knew I couldn't ever get on there to play hockey.
I went to a practice that one of my buddies was, for a team, one of my buddies was on, and it was my age, like 13, whatever. And I probably could have made the team, but I was wearing a toque so that he wouldn't realize, the coach wouldn't realize I was a girl, because I guess I sort of figured that they wouldn't want a girl on the team. I don't know why I thought that, but anyway, I probably figured that one out. So my toque fell off while we were practicing, and I was so shy in those days that I just left. I packed up and left, which I probably shouldn't have, because maybe he wouldn't have kicked me off after all. I don't know. I was good enough to make his team, so anyway, it didn't happen.
The rink rats didn't mind me playing at all, but I was the only female. So when I wanted to join minor hockey, I was given an opportunity to dress in my dad's office and just kind of blend in with one of the young kids' teams. And so I got to play a couple games, but unfortunately I scored a goal, and when people started to realize who I was, they threw me out of minor hockey because it was for boys.
Where I grew up, in this area, anywhere, which sometimes I refer to as the Peterborough area, but it's the Campbellford area, hockey was always very prevalent, and let's say in the 60s and 70s, I played hockey for Campbellford, well-established league. So it didn't seem as if I was a pioneer of women's hockey. There were times when we would play, if we were playing men's teams or young men's teams, in an attempt to find a level of competition that would help us to raise our game up, that there was, you really could hear the resentment sometimes, or someone would take you into the boards and just, say something that was nasty. And I think they felt threatened in a way, and that's their problem, that's not our problem. But there definitely were those times when I think people maybe looked at us and wondered, well, why would you want to play this rough game, this man's game? Well, because it's Canada's game, and it's our game too, and it's the best game.
Well, when I first went to Queen's, I knew that they played intramural hockey because I had seen them. I was at KCVI and I'd go over and watch the gals at lunchtime, and I thought, oh, this is wonderful. But I thought they should really have intercollegiate hockey. So I started agitating. Here's a little freshette, talking to the director of athletics about hockey. Well, I was very lucky because Marion Ross was the director then, and she wanted more women to be able to play intercollegiate sports. Anyway, there was a bit of a problem about equipment because that was going to cost money. So Miss Ross was really hedging about that, because obviously we weren't going to be allowed to play unless we had proper pads. So at that point, the total intercollegiate budget for females was the same amount of money as the cleaning bill for the men's football team. You can look it up. Well, obviously there wasn't any money for equipment. So one day, Stu Langdon, who was the trainer of the Queen's teams at that point, Stu was a wonderful guy. Anyway, we were in the arena and he said, "Cookie, come here, I've got something to show you." And he led me in the old Jock Hardy. The dressing rooms were in series. So he led me through the first dressing room and into the second dressing room. These are all under the seats on both sides of the rink. into the second one, and into the third one. And in the back corner of the third one, there were some great big wooden boxes. They were about 3 feet wide and 3 feet high and about 8 feet long. And he said, he lifted up the lid of one, and here's all the equipment for a hockey team. And he said, it's yours. It's been in mothballs since 1938. This was 1959. So we had our equipment, so Mr. Ross had to give us our team, our intercollegiate team. So they changed, and I was really lucky that at that point, the lady who was in charge of athletics at McMaster was also keen on hockey, and Guelph. They were also keen on hockey. So the only ones who weren't that keen were Toronto and McGill. But we ended up with a 6-team league, all right, Western being the 6th. So we had exhibition for 2 years, and then they went to being intercollegiate in about 1960, must have been 64. So that worked out quite well.
And actually when I came to Queens, the equipment that they offered for a goalie was worse than what I'd had passed around the arena in Picton. So I won some kind of a bursary at high school, so I used it to buy goalie equipment.
Before that year, I had not worn hockey skates regularly. It was just figure skates. So I certainly had to adapt to wearing hockey skates. So I could still do side stops and skate backwards really well, but it was just like remembering not to use the pick, or the pick's not there, so it's just different. That's all.
The difference in teams then and teams now, well, in the intercollegiate, everybody can skate. When we first started the intercollegiate, I mean, it was whoever turned out could be on the team because we didn't get that many turning out. Well, the first few years of the intercollegiate, half of them had figure skates. So we would file off the bottom pick on the figure skates so they wouldn't trip themselves.
As you know, Cookie Cartwright preceded me. She had basically graduated. I think she may have been there the first year I played in 64, 65, and then she was gone. So I don't remember distinctly, but my nose probably twitched when I heard hockey, and I just found out where it was and showed up. In my figure skates, they didn't have tube skates, and my father always just filed off the bottom pick, and he wasn't the only one that did that, I'm sure. In 1967, I started to work at the Y in Kingston, and went to Picton to play hockey because I knew there were hockey teams there, and Cartwright was driving back and forth to Toronto to play because she was articling for her law degree in Toronto and was playing with the Don Mills team. And I'm quite sure it was the Picton tournament, which was designated as the provincial tournament, right? That we chatted about how stupid it was to be going scattering in all directions to play hockey, when surely in the town of Kingston there would have been enough girls and women who would have liked to have played hockey. So we just decided to give it a go, as far as I recall. I don't remember very many
I really
details.
don't remember. Twit and I decided that we could have a team, we could see what we could find. And I guess in about October, we sort of, they knew a few people who played ball. So these were kids that were relatively athletic. So you just sort of spread the word. We're going to have a hockey team, so come on. Have you ever played hockey?
What happened was I played ball against you guys, right?
Yep.
Against,
Or with us.
well, I think it was at the time I was playing
Maybe.
against you and against Fergie, and I
Yeah.
kind of got Fergie hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
So Mr. Weatherden really wasn't on my side, so at that point, because it was his Fergie, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think it kind of evolved out of playing ball that I kind of got with the Barons.
Yep. Well, nobody questions the fact that you were a ball player, because that's your claim to fame. Kingston Sports Hall of Fame ball player.
And how I started out with Red Barons was I saw an ad in the newspaper. I just started working at Queen's, and I was 20 years old. And there was going to be a practice for tryouts at the Memorial Centre on some morning at 6 a.m. in the morning. And so I went over to Canadian Tire and bought all new hockey equipment, packed that into my 1972 brand new Datsun, and off I went.
Are there any female hockey players in Kingston looking for a place to play? Well, if there are, the Kingston Red Barons need you. Yeah, I saw this in the Week Standard and I thought, wow, I'd like to try that and see if I can play with a team, eh? So I went in and tried it, and I had a lot to learn, but I was willing to learn. And had a lot of fun, a lot of different people and just meet, and it was great.
Wishing I could play. There weren't any girls allowed to play hockey back at that time. And so when the Red Barons advertised for hockey players, I probably was one of the first ones that signed up to play.
Queens had always been like a farm team for the Red Barons at that point, and so there were a number of players from that team, or from our Queens group, that they would ask us if we were interested in playing in that kind of a league, and of course we were.
I actually chose Queen's over other universities because the last year that I was in high school, the Queen's University team won the intercollegiate championship, and I thought, yes, that's the team I want to be part of. So I chose to go to Queen's rather than Toronto or Western, which I could have gone to, but I chose to go to Queen's because I wanted to play for this great Queen's hockey team. And I wasn't even sure if I would make the team, but I did. And of course, I got to know Annabelle and Annabelle Twiddy and Cookie Cartwright, who were the coaches of the Queen's team. And that, of course, led me into the Red Barons because they were always interested and willing to support anyone who wanted to play for both teams at the same time. And I was just keen to play as much hockey as I could.
I'm convinced in the time frame that I was at Queen's, we had 3 championships in 5 years. And the only reason why I believe we were able to do that is because the amount of hockey and practicing that a lot of our team was doing with the Red Barons. So it made both teams pretty effective and really strong competitors. So it was fun. It was really fun and so nice to be able to play at that caliber.
When I went on to university, I was very sensitive to costs of university tuition, and I was offered a scholarship by McMaster University. However, my desire was to come to Queen's, not necessarily because of the program or because of the university, but because I had an opportunity to play with both the Red Barons and the university hockey team. And so my dad said to me, he said, don't worry about the scholarship money, go to Kingston, go to Queen's, go where you want to go. So it was really about supporting those ambitions and aspirations.
The women athletic directors felt that hockey was pretty rough. So the only way we got hockey in intercollegiate was to have no deliberate body checking, which, okay, fine. It was pretty funny when I went to Toronto in '67 because never having played body checking, I wasn't quite ready. It took me till about February to get my head up. And I remember one day I was in Phil Baker's court on Tuesday, and I'd had a game Sunday night, and I forget how many cuts I had on my face. And he just looked at me and said, "Oh, Miss Cartwright, playing hockey again, were you?" Yes, Your Honor.
The other biggest difference that I would highlight, that it would wake you up every time you switched from a tricolored jersey to a Red Baron jersey. As you stepped on the ice, the Red Barons had checking, we didn't. So about the first shift or two, you kind of got caught with your head down, and sure enough, you'd get that check of a lifetime, and it'd shake you back into reality that, oh yeah, this is the Red Barons, it's not the Queen's League. So we always used to chuckle that, remember when you step on the ice, this is the checking side.
Sometimes we'd come back a little bashed up and I separated my shoulder a couple times, and the trainer wasn't too happy about that. But, you know, we just said, sorry, that's what we do on our off time. We play for this other team.
It was very unique in that a lot of people got the opportunity as women to play girls hockey in that era. We were very fortunate. I was fortunate to find the right people that allowed me to play on that team and to be there. You didn't mind the 6 a.m. practices on a school day because you just wanted to be on the ice and be a part of women's hockey.
Same with everybody else. A lot of our players were trying to keep up with their studies. Then you've got a 6:30 a.m. practice at Cook's Arena because that's the only time ice is available. So you're dragging your butt out of bed on a cold winter morning. And Rhonda Lehman, who I roomed with for a couple of years, she had a car. Thelma was the name of her car, and it didn't always start. There were many mornings that we started our mornings by pushing Thelma down the street, trying to get up enough speed to get her started, and then off we'd hop in and go to the rink.
There was no better feeling then, even though it was 6 o'clock in the morning. I used to try to get out on the ice first at that time, and skate on the brand new fresh ice and listen to your skates go.
Yeah,
cut through the ice.
Yeah.
That was always something I'll remember too. I hated the 6 o'clock practices, but
again, as soon as your skates hit the ice, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
No.
That's the best feeling. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Exactly.
It was difficult to find competition because there were very few teams. I always remember going to Picton. That was one of our favorites. They always had great ice there. We would go to tournaments in Toronto, and there was always the big Brampton tournament, and we would go there, and that was where there was, you know, teams there to play. But we had to travel a lot.
You know, we did a lot of traveling to Stirling and Havelock, and there were tournaments in Toronto. We've been to Montreal for tournaments, and of course up in Picton and all the rest. But yeah, it was good, and they loved it. They loved being on the road and doing stuff together.
I just remember lots of times in the car, because we didn't take buses. I mean, when you're with Queens, you're on a bus. But when you're with the Red Barons, you know, a Cookie would be driving, or Annabelle, or Pipes would drive, and you're carpooling and riding together, spelling each other off, driving. Sometimes the weather was bad, like nasty winter weather, as you're driving from here to Toronto or here to Montreal or Wallaceburg. We had a big tournament in Wallaceburg every year.
We were talking earlier about the van that Cookie renovated to take the team on. She took out the back seats and put benches in, and we used to pile all the hockey equipment in the center of that, and off we would go. There would be probably 7 or 8 of us piled in that van.
But Cookie took a lot of the girls in her van, which probably had very hard benches. But they were happy. We got there, we all had fun, and if we were going to do something that we had to play very early in the morning, I remember having the muffins and things, and would knock on the doors and pass in the muffins, and everybody would be quite happy to have the muffin, except for Cookie, and she would just be in her van and have her raw egg. But that was fine, so.
I still, like you said, that's one that, with Cookie, that I vividly remember. We were at Brampton for the Canadettes, and for whatever reason, she said she wasn't sleeping in the hotel. It was too hot or too dry or whatever the case may be. And she decided she was going to sleep in her van. And so I don't know why, but I was going out the next morning with Bob Weatherden and Kim Ferguson. And we were going for breakfast. Well, we walked out the door and the frost was like a quarter of an inch thick on the windows. Oh no, she's froze. And so Bob went over and he knocked on the door, and there's nothing for a minute or two, and then all of a sudden Cookie opens up the door and she goes, "Oh, how are you guys?" And she's got her homemade granola breakfast, and it's nothing out of the ordinary. So,
yeah, not for her.
But we're like, oh my God, she's froze to death because it had dropped so much that night.
It always, I'm pretty sure it was always on the Easter weekend. So we would kind of leave our Easter at home, and we would go up to Brampton. I can remember one time Cookie opened her hood of her car, and she had a huge ham there. And we, after playing hockey, it was just like, oh my goodness. So we all kind of hung around her car and really enjoyed kind of an Easter meal. But it was, we had great times there, yeah.
And the tournaments, many of them we had to travel a long way. To go to Wallaceburg, it was really a long, long trip. And if we got into the finals, it was very early in the morning by the time we got home, and then had to get up for work the next day.
The biggest thing I remember is the one year that we went to Wallaceburg, which is like a 6-hour drive, and we won the championship, which meant we finished playing at 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday night, and I had to be to work for 7 o'clock Monday morning, and we were 6 hours from home. I got home at 5 o'clock, and I changed and showered and went to work all day. So
at this game, after it was all over with, we go out to the van. Most of the locals were like dissipated so fast, and we were the only ones in this parking lot in the middle of Cooper, in the middle of nowhere. And Cookie goes to get the Econo van going, and it doesn't turn over. There's nothing. And like, here we are, like, what are we gonna do? And in the field right behind the rink are the coyotes yipping away. And Cartwright says, I know what we'll do. Everybody get out of the van. We're gonna push the van. I'll pop the clutch and it will start. So sure enough, we all get out of the van, and all 8 women, start pushing the van. And sure enough, Cookie pops the clutch and it gets going. People, that's a real Canadian hockey moment.
We were very fortunate. Our coach at that time was Bob Weatherden, and we can't give enough thanks to Pipes, was his nickname. He was a manager at Loblaws, and he did everything he could to make this a great experience. So he gave his time freely, and he is one of the coaches that I will always remember for his passion for women's sport. And unfortunately, he's passed away, but if you played for the Red Barons, you became a part of the Weatherden family. And the Aylesworth family, they were the other ones that really embraced the team. And those experiences were pretty special to the athletes. It was fun to be a part of that.
Bob loved to barbecue steaks for them, and I would make baked beans and have all the good stuff and spaghetti, and it was more family. It really was. It really was a family.
So from what we understand, Bob showed up at Cartwright and Cartwright one day and talked to Cookie, and the next thing we knew, he was at our practices. And he had this weird squeaky voice, so of course we called him Pipes. He was intense, he was colorful.
Well organized, always had a good practice for sure.
Yep.
Knew exactly what he wanted us to do all the time, and just loved hockey. and for some reason loved coaching the Red Barons, because it was a lot of fun with Bob coaching.
We never went to a practice that he didn't have something weird for us to do. I don't know how he thought these things up. He probably dreamed them up in his sleep. And Wanda tells a story about how she thinks he stocked shelves at Loblaw's.
Yeah, I think probably offensively and defensively. The same with grocery carts. They probably were lined up a certain way. I'm sure he did everything thinking hockey, because that's the way he always came across at practices and at games, that he'd given it a lot of thought, and he was just an awesome coach.
An example of how we were slightly uncoachable from Bob's point of view is that Jide would never come out of the net. Our goaltender, Wanda Jide, would never leave the net if we were down a goal and Bob thought the goalie should be pulled so we could put the extra man on the ice. And Wanda just philosophically disagreed with ever pulling a goaltender out of a game. She did not think that statistically that worked, and she refused to leave the net. So that's an example of how Bob would be motioning Wanda over to the net. Come on, we'll put the extra man on. And there'd be someone on the boards ready to jump over, but Wanda would just shake her head and say nope, and she was staying in the net. So we just had to go and try to get that extra goal with the 5 men on the ice, which sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. But Bob knew that. He knew he had a group of women who loved the game and loved each other and loved him, but we played the game our way.
I don't remember not coming to the bench. Now, I do have concerns about being pulled too early, so it is possible that I might have not seen that,
not heard it,
not heard or seen that
not heard
particular
the
request. But
I don't think anyone would disagree that a group of women, and women strong-minded enough to do something as crazy as start a women's hockey team. I mean, I am the last person to say that I am not strong-minded. I am the first person to say I am strong-minded. Cartwright is strong-minded. I wouldn't argue with Skeggs very much. I wouldn't argue with Quincy. I mean, these are people, and Wanda's one of them, who has very strong convictions about things and strong opinions about things, and even about how to play the game. And even to the extent that, looking back, we were breaking ground. So what we thought about how the game should be played was probably as valid as what anybody thought. But you put those, say, 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 strong-minded people and try and make a cohesive unit out of them to do something specific, other than the fact that we all loved the game so passionately, it would have been impossible.
The Ellsworth family were the second family of the Red Barons after the Weathertons were first, and then the Aylesworths came along when Shorty joined the team in 73, 70 something, or 3 about that.
Yeah.
She came in as on the house league team, and soon was playing with the Red Barons because Shorty was certainly top-notch material. And we were so fortunate because with Shorty came Mr. and Mrs. Aylesworth and Art. Yep. Mr. A always was driving. He liked to drive for sure. He was a great driver. I remember coming home from somewhere we'd played in the States, maybe Canton?
I think it was, yeah.
And the 401 was just glare ice. And I remember sitting myself with my feet braced against the floor because it was so icy. And Mr. A just puffed on his pipe and brought us home. It was amazing.
Which is really unfortunate when you're trying to go back now and say how good this league really was. You've got your doubters that will say, yeah, well, show me. Where is that? And unfortunately, there are no record books for the Red Barons.
Well, Dave McMaster was the first coach of the national team in 1989. He said once that the 3 best skaters, he had seen a lot of hockey at many, many levels, and he said the 3 best skaters he had ever seen were Paul Coffey, Bobby Orr, and Sue Wright. Those of us who played with and against Sue agree with that. She was phenomenal. She could do anything. She could stop on a dime. She could be in full flight backwards and stop and be in full flight forward in 2 steps.
The one ability that she had that was distinctive, and anyone who watched her play for 5 minutes would have noticed that she could be skating backwards. The puck would either come to her or she'd take it away from someone and change direction from skating full torque backwards to within 1 or 2 strides be full steam ahead, which anyone else would be circling around to try and get to her, to check her. And she had such elusiveness and skill with the puck that she would either take the puck to the net herself or set up a really good play. And other players made her better, and she made other players better. There's no use being on her team if you couldn't take a pass that was coming at you at full force, because it would knock the stick out of your hand and the play would be over. So if you were on her team and on the ice when she was there, you were prepared for a hard pass, and you were prepared to get it right on your stick, right in stride, and it would be very obvious what you should do about it. We referred to her, we referred to Bobby Orr as the Sue Wright of the NHL, because she controlled a game whenever she was on the ice, and that was a lot because no coach in their right mind would leave her on the bench. So she just was so smooth and so skilled, so strong and so balanced, and so in control of the game that she stood out to anyone who ever saw her play.
I always felt really good after I played a game. I felt like I was contributing to something other than just myself. It was fun, it was exhilarating, got my adrenaline going, and those are things that I feel in my professional career as well. You get those same emotions when you've just finished a good presentation or you've succeeded in getting a project executed. Those are all skills that I look back on, and I think if I had not had hockey and the opportunity to build and develop and grow those skills, I'm not so sure that my path would have taken me where it's taken me.
Well, Kim Ferguson was the youngest player on our team, of course, and it was really amazing in retrospect to think that we were playing on the same team as a 10-year-old, and it would be unheard of today, of course. 10-year-olds have their own teams, and she's expressed regret that she never got to play on a team of her own age until she got to university. But I don't think she regretted being a Red Baron. She just regretted that we weren't all 10 years old. But she was a good skater, but she was little. And I don't know whether this was in her mind, but what it looked like when she went after the puck, it looked like she figured out that if she dived head first and extended her stick, she was twice as big as she was. She was twice as big horizontal as she was vertical if she had her stick in front of her. And often she would make that an effective procedure and take pucks away from people that should have never been able to take pucks away from if she'd have stayed on her feet. She also was hugely effective on her feet too, because of course she was always in the right place at the right time. Even though she was little, she knew the game because she had grown up in it. Her whole family was hockey players, and she had watched it, and her father had taught her, and her brothers had mentored her, and so she knew the game and she knew where she needed to be.
And once I learned how to skate and was fortunate again to be able to play with the Red Barons, I knew, for example, if I was having trouble with crossovers going to the left, I would come here for hours on end and practice crossovers to the left. Or if I was working on my slap shot,
yep,
make sure no one else was here at the rink. But I would come over here by myself and I would take shots, and my shot got better, yep, because I would come here on my own because I would know, hey, I need to do this better.
My favorite team was the Montreal Canadiens, and my favorite player was J.C. Tremblay because he played defense and I was a defenseman, so I really studied him a lot, and I never saw myself as a defenseman who would score a lot of goals, and in fact I did not score a lot of goals, but I did try to master the art of the poke check and you know, how to angle a player off to the side. Love Jean Beliveau, of course.
I used to practice in the basement a lot, and I was practicing to learn how to raise the puck. And I was getting better at it, and one day I was doing the backhand raising, and bang, I broke a window. I raised it too high. So, yeah, yikes.
When I was about 12, I guess, I realized I wasn't going to make the NHL because my buddy, Frankie Jaudoin, I could stay with him fine for the first rush, and then the second rush he'd be a little bit ahead, and then the third rush he'd be quite a bit ahead. So I realized that there were differences between males and females, and I wasn't going to make the NHL. That was very disappointing. Until then, that was all I wanted, was to make the NHL.
And my goal pads and goalie equipment are in the Verona dump. I buried them there one Saturday afternoon. One of the neighbors was actually there. I'd played in a tournament in Piccadilly, and I knew that if I had to quit, because as long as you have goalie equipment, somebody always wants you to play, because there's always a need for a goalie someplace. And I knew that I was going to end up probably killing myself because my knees were shot, and I just wasn't playing anywhere near the level that I would want to play. So I said this was my last tournament. I was done. And so after the game and after the tournament, which we lost in overtime 1-0, I went to the dump and backed the car up. My equipment was in the back, and I opened it up, and one of our neighbors was next to us with a pickup truck, and I was chucking my goal pads and stuff into the dump, and he just looked at me and he said, "Have a bad game?" I said, "No, it's been a fantastic ride, but it's over."
I went on to play for McMaster University for 2 years, and then went on to the university. I finished at the University of Guelph. Went on to coach the University of Guelph for 2-3-year stints. And in 1990, I had the distinct honor of captaining the first Canadian women's hockey team to a world championship in Ottawa.
Very soon in the 70s, the suggestion was made that the Kingston Red Barons would run clinics for girls to play hockey and ringette, and so we did that. And the trade-off was that if we would do these clinics, the ice rental rate that we were paying would not be the senior adult rate, but it would be the junior youth rate. And in those days, it was a difference of nearly $30 an hour. So that was quite significant, and we were quite happy to do that. And out of that grew some about 30 to 35 players, largely children, who joined, were made into teams, and became a house league in Kingston.
And then when I was 11 years old, we saw an ad, my parents and I saw an ad in the paper that the local women's hockey team, the Red Barons, was going to start a house league. And it was for girls of all ages who wanted to play. And luckily my parents were very supportive. They knew that I'd been playing sports a lot already and wasn't going to break if I ran into someone or any of that nature. So it was okay to play hockey. And asked if I wanted for sure to sign up, and I said absolutely. I definitely wanted to play, and signed up, and there were enough players for a couple of teams that year, and so that was my first official on ice in the arena on a team with hockey.
So in 1975, the Frontenac County Girls Hockey Association was formed. Once the association was formed and the executive got busy with these 2 teams or 3 teams, they found out that there was a lot more girls that wanted to play hockey than they had room for. Every year they would hold a sign up, and there would be a number of girls, a list as long as your arm, wanting to play hockey, and there wasn't any room for them. So that was a lot of pressure put on the executive to find more ice time. And it just wasn't available. It was taken up by the boys. And so they did bring a law in the 80s that there has to be equality here between the girls and the boys wanting to play sports. That is how the executive got more ice time.
Jana, yeah, Jana Hefford. This is a good story about Jana. Ringette was in existence in Kingston when Jana was 8. And apparently she went out for ringette and scored a goal, and in the time-honored way, put her stick up as she skated back to center ice and got a penalty for putting her stick up. And she went home and said, "I don't want to play ringette anymore, Mom." I love that story.
And then during the 90s was what I always thought of was the real heyday of girls hockey, at least community-based hockey in Kingston. There was more and more girls getting interested in playing girls hockey because we got more ice time and we were able to look after every girl that wanted to play girls hockey. They were becoming very serious about it, and the parents were becoming very serious about it.
Most of the Red Barons were the coaches and perhaps even the officiants, I don't remember. But they were very involved in the league, wanting to get more girls playing. And by the end of that season, they invited me to come and play on the Red Barons. So the next season, I went up to the big leagues. And I know that I didn't play that much at first, but that was okay. It was, again, such a huge learning curve, playing with and against now women who were quite a bit older than myself. So it was a huge learning curve at first to get used to now a much higher level of playing and traveling more and just sort of expanding my own skills in order to keep up with that.
The boys' teams that we played, they had no problem at all playing against girls' teams. They loved it. There was no, like, it was just everybody was equal and we had no problem. But it was more like a societal attitude. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it wasn't the people from hockey. No, that's for sure, you know, that had any problem with the girls playing hockey. No, so it was, but it was just change. Yep. Change takes time, and now look at it.
And there were leagues, well, there was a league around Peterborough, and there were leagues down in southwestern Ontario too. There were teams all over once we started our team and realized, well, I'd played in Toronto, so I knew about the good teams, but I didn't know about all the sort of B and C level teams. But they were all over the place. And in about 1974, the Ministry of, whatever it was called then, Culture and Recreation, they had heard about women's hockey and they thought that we should be organized. So I was a lawyer with a secretary, so this fellow in this department got hold of me and said, "We think there should be a provincial organization, so why don't you organize it?" And do you want me to go on with this stuff? Okay.
And Cookie Cartwright, one of their players, was a great ambassador, one of the founders of the OWHA and really the first president of the OWHA. And that was finally a network of people that came together. We had different groups trying to build the game. As teams came together, they tried to talk about how can we make it better. The game's over now, how can we make it better for ourselves and for future generations? And through those meetings at various tournaments, the OWHA came to be with a steering committee, and Cookie Cartwright took on the first presidency, was key to writing the documents that have enabled the OWHA today is the only organization of its kind in the entire world, and has driven a lot of initiatives and really facilitates the network of women's hockey, making the game better and growing the game. So it's not just the game on the ice that the Red Barons did. They have done a lot off the ice, and they continue to do a lot off the ice.
I think it's wonderful of people that we can get some sort of recognition now. And it's funny because we were doing this stuff 50 years ago. But when the kids who started playing in the 90s think that hockey started then, I think, sort of the histories have not been filled in because women were playing hockey from the 1890s on.
And there was great university teams back in the early eras. And then up through the 50s and 60s, teams like the Toronto Ladies came about, Harry Lazarenko. There's many, many names that could be mentioned. The Edmonton team out west, down in the US, Michigan and Massachusetts were very powerful in the game. But then moving into the Kingston Red Barons era and the players we're paying tribute to now. If hockey then was as it is now, those players would be in consideration to go into the Hockey Hall of Fame.
It's just a wonderful story of how sport impacts life, and the two go hand in hand. And no self-interest, just love of sport. That's what you can say about the Red Barons. They really should be in the Kingston Hockey Hall of Fame. It's amazing that they aren't.
And there are many parallels to women in sport today. Pay equity, equal pay for equal work, ice time, still communities fighting for accessibility to facilities, equipment, professional hockey, the fall of the CWHL in the last year. There are so many parallels to what was taking place then and the struggles at different magnitudes, but still a very consistent undercurrent of the fact of the women's game has not yet gained full respect, full accessibility, and full equity, even in a country that calls this our national sport.
And it was the beginning. Look at what the girls have now.
I guess so.
Where would you and Cookie and Sue Wright and people like that would have went with the Olympics? Because, as you say, everybody plays one sport now, and I think that's because the Olympics, everybody wants. That's what they want, and that's where they want to go. Is they're all gearing towards going to the Olympics now. We were just lucky enough to find enough teams to play, right?
Let's go
Picton,
play the
let's
boys.
Go to Belleville.
Let's go to
Picton and let's go to Trenton, and we'll dress in this
little truck out behind.
Little truck out behind the
rink.
Not even a real dressing room, right?
Yeah.
So things are way different now.
And they were the beginning of helping those teams get started and show that girls could play hockey and know that it was okay to have girls' teams and that they could play hockey and be able to set up their own leagues, which has happened now. So it's amazing to see that those teams in the beginning, that there was only a few of us, has spread to so many now.
Because if you ask an older member of Kingston society, and I do that at the movie theater, I would say to you, happen to know the Red Barons? Oh yes, they were wonderful players. Everybody remembers the Red Barons. They were the first and only team, professional quality team at the time. And they laid the groundwork for, as Jana Heffert said, what is happening today.
Because, as you said, skating is everything. And we both skated for hours and hours and hours, from the first freeze till the last thaw, almost.
And then we played road hockey out in front of the house.
Yeah, we played in the driveway and slammed it up against the garage door.
Yeah.
In the mill yard.
Yeah, we were just
born the right time.
And in the right place.
In the right
this
places,
park where we're sitting, like I've mentioned before, and being able to have a cul-de-sac in front of the house, the
You had two
freedom,
rinks.
the freedom to be able to do those things and a family that supported you.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
important to me. So.
It shows you the old sports theories where you have to hate your opponent. They were so wrong and so off base because it took your focus off what you had to do to win. And you can, that's one of the things that has defined women's hockey. We have always had respect for the opposition. We've always had respect for and that doesn't mean you can't play with intensities and aggression, but you play within the rules of the game, and you want to win that game. But once it's over, you want to make the game better together, and that's what's defined women's hockey. And I truly think that's what defines women's sports.
And Annabelle Twiddy, I think of all the people, I still remember her in the change room. And, we'd have a little talk about what we're doing on the ice. And then, the last thing she'd say to us when we were going out the door, and you had to laugh, was that, okay, you bird turds, let's get out there and play some hockey. Well, honest to God, like it just set the whole tempo, it set the whole environment. Like we were going to do as well as we could, but we were going to enjoy what we were doing. And that's an important thing, I think, to instill in the younger people these days. And the whole story about the Red Barons is important for the kids to understand. So
it was not a team where the best players were plucked from somewhere and invited to play for this team. Anybody that wanted to play for the Kingston Red Barons could play for the Kingston Red Barons. And that's just the way it was. It was a very inclusive team, and we were there for the love of the sport. And we laughed at each other at the mistakes we made, but we were always supportive of everyone who put on that red jersey. I mean, the jersey itself tells you the story. It's a comic strip character, and it's just fun. There's nothing serious or deep about the symbolism of having Snoopy on your on your jersey. That kind of, I think, sums up the team. We were there for the fun of it, and along the way we played some pretty good hockey.